It's a bit of if we were editing this, we could insert the sometimes they may be good, sometimes they may be shit reference to...
But you've just done it, so we don't need to now.
Same
Maybe
thing.
give it a bit more gusto.
Sometimes they may be good, sometimes they may be shit.
I'm glad I asked you to do that. That's good. That's the clip. That's the clip. Yeah.
Gentlemen, this is Democracy Manifest.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this rather, I don't want to call it a rushed podcast, but how would you describe it? Let's pull back the curtain a little bit just to start.
It's rushed.
It's rushed. It's a good word. I chose the right word from the get-go.
Well, you know what? We do have an interview with a local Central Coast artist coming up after we record this. So there's a bit of rush element going on there. Otherwise, everything we're about to do was planned, and we made a conscious decision to do it that way. But we are...
That's true. We've got ourselves to blame for how rushed we're feeling right now.
We had Monday night. We had Tuesday night. We said, no. Let's do it Wednesday. Let's try and do a one-take music and news, which is what we do anyway, like 9 times out of 10.
More or less.
With maybe a little bit of cuts in the middle, but very, very rarely.
But that's mainly because of internet and connectivity problems, more so than content issues.
Exactly.
But yeah, so to peel back the curtain, it's currently Wednesday evening, 6:06 p.m. to be exact. As of recording, this goes up on Thursday morning. So we're not leaving ourselves a lot of time. So this is going to be a one take, hit record, and then stop when we're done and hit upload. So hopefully it doesn't sound too different to a normal episode, but it might.
He's hoping. You're going to let us know if it's shit, but I think it'll be pretty much the same. The benefit is, the reason we're doing this is because often we would do these music newses from our respective homes. And at the moment, both Cam and myself have been plagued by some horrible internet issues. I don't really know the source of ours. Cam, you're trying to get to the bottom of yours.
Well, I got a whole new modem. Optus said that my old modem was fucked, and that's why they sent me a new one. But it's for the most part, it is better, but it's still not great.
Still not good enough.
Yeah.
So we're in person because we have this other interview coming up. So we thought, let's just try one take music news. We'll get that in-person chemistry, et cetera, and it'll sound pretty much the same as the other ones.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
But we'll move into the first story. There is so much news to get through.
There's heaps.
We have about 4 or 5 stories bookmarked. Really, probably going to go through 2 of them. But just know that if we didn't have as much of a time restriction and we did have 3 hours just to sit here and chat, it probably could be a 3-hour music news because there's so much to get through.
Yes, absolutely. And before we even get into any of them, we just wanted to kick off with a big shout out to friend of ours, friend of Homebrewed, Lou has been on the show once when the Central Coast Music and Arts launched, and I interviewed Lou and Greg, and
that was a radio show.
It was a radio show, yeah, not on the podcast,
not the pod, but on the radio. Yeah.
But anyway, Lou Saulies. Damn it! I really G'd this up because we've known Lou for years, but I've never had to pronounce her last name, and I was just like, I got this.
I've seen it. I've never had to say it.
Yeah, Lou Sauleski is what I'm going to land on. I'm really sorry, Lou, if that's a mispronunciation. I just haven't said it before. But Lou has won the Community Engagement Award from the Association of Artist Managers, which is, it's a big deal as far as artist management goes, and for her work as part of Central Coast Music and Art. So massive shout out to Lou for that. That's a fantastic bit of, Central Coast music product there. She does great work for Central Coast Music and Arts, also managing some big bands and coordinating and putting on all sorts of things. Very hard worker, very, very passionate. So shout out to Lou for winning the Community Engagement award at the AAM Awards.
Absolutely. A massive local hero and champion for Central Coast Music as well. So thoroughly deserved. And every single comment was congratulating her and saying as much, that she absolutely deserved it, because one of the hardest working here on the Central Coast, so much passion. And as Eamon said, we've known Lou for quite a long time now, and she's always been a strong supporter of us as well. So congratulations to Lou.
Absolutely. Congratulations, Lou. Awesome news. And that's going to be the positive start. We actually have another positive
congratulations to the state government.
a bit.
Asterisk.
Yeah. But yeah, we do have congratulations also in order for the New South Wales government.
Actually, sorry, I've just remembered the second story.
Yeah.
They're both government related.
And they're both the same government.
And even the first story, there is a little asterisk about the congratulations as well, I feel.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I could be being a bit harsh. But
It's a bit of if we were editing this, we could insert the sometimes they may be good, sometimes they may be shit reference to.
But you've just done it, so we don't need to now.
Same
Maybe
thing.
give it a bit more gusto.
Sometimes they may be good, sometimes they may be shit.
I'm glad I asked you to do that.
yeah.
That's good. That's the clip. That's the clip. Yeah.
So yeah, that's for you, Chris Minns. But we're talking about Michael's rule, which we spoke about. I believe we were actually sitting across from one another doing the music news at Sonora Studios, as we are now. The last time we spoke about Michael's rule, if I'm remembering correctly.
You know what? I reckon you are. Because I was recently going through all of our Homebrewed episodes and realised that Michael's Rule was the first music news we did on this podcast. And I'm pretty sure the very first one we did was in this very room in person.
Yeah, and here we are again, doing it again.
Michael, he brings the best out of everyone, doesn't
He
he?
does. So we spoke about Michael's Rule, which was basically the long and short of Michael's Rule. It's named after the late legendary artist manager Michael McMartin. And at the time we spoke about it, this was the industry going about pushing for the introduction of a rule that would basically say, if you're an international artist and you're touring, then you need to have an Australian artist on the bill. That's kind of, it needs to be a law. And from our chats with Marshall Cullen from Damien Gerard, he told us that it used to be law back in the day. That used to be
Back in the golden days of 90s or early 2000s, I feel like he was talking about.
Yeah. He's Hoodoo Guru's tight with them and was touring as part of their kind of setup. So
Maybe even earlier than 90s or 2000s. But yeah, it used to be a law and the government wanted to bring it back. Well, maybe not the government wanted to bring it back.
The industry.
But the industry wanted to bring it back. And as such, the state government have, with an asterisk, sort of put it into law.
kind
in
of
a little bit, kind of. Not really.
encouraged it.
Yeah, not really put it into law. And I think the headlines that I saw, I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And then I read into it and I thought, oh, it's not as good as I maybe thought it was going to, because the headlines make it seem like they've just passed Michael's rule, which is what we wanted it to happen. But what's actually happened, which is still good, they're offering money off your venue hire if you're an international act and you have an Aussie support.
Yes. And this obviously only works for the venues that the state government has any say over in that sense. But effectively, yeah, if you're an international artist touring and you want to play at a venue that is operated by the New South Wales government or Venues New South Wales, which does operate quite a lot, Venues New South Wales around the state. They include places like Accor Stadium,
which is a big one in Homebush.
It is. Allianz, which is the not as big one in Sydney.
In Moore Park, yeah.
Combank out in Western
The
Sydney.
slightly smaller one in Parramatta.
That's slightly small. All the second and third are new. The first one's not as new.
And the second and third, the Mariners have won grand finals.
That's exactly right.
Actually, no, we haven't won at Allianz.
Oh, no, we haven't. We've
Actually,
yes,
no,
have.
Wanderers.
We did.
We did.
We beat the Wanderers.
Yep.
McDonald Jones Stadium, we haven't won a grand final there, but the Mariners have beaten the Jets comprehensively a number of times over the last few years there, so that's good. And the SCG, the Sydney Opera House, is also participating in the scheme, but their rules are slightly different. But that is, like Accor, that's where the big...
Taylor Swift, Foo Fighters, all the biggest international acts come to town.
Allianz, they're wanting to bring more to. Combank has gigs every year. McDonald Jones has gigs every year. The SCG, I haven't heard of a gig there, but that might just be me not hearing of a gig at the SCG.
Yeah, because I guess if you're in that precinct, you're probably more than likely using Allianz or the football stadium, or you're at the Hordern Pavilion for an arena type show. So I haven't heard of too much at the SCG, but $20,000 off your venue hire for all of those, and then $5,000 off if you're at the Opera House as well, which is, it's not nothing, but the debate that we were having before we hit record, which was, if you're Taylor Swift, is 20 grand really enough to make you go, I should put an Aussie support on my tour because I'm going to get 20 grand off the venue hire. For her, it's probably not that important. But for some of your smaller or even mid-scale international acts who are touring, that 20 grand would be very nice to have in their pocket, especially because it is so much more expensive to tour over here.
Yeah, 100%. So basically what has to happen, promoters who want to access this incentive, they'll apply through Venues New South Wales and or Sydney Opera House when they're trying to book their gigs or their tours. They're assessed as eligible via Venues New South Wales, and also the Australian artist must be announced at the same time as the tour. So they get the green light from Venues New South Wales, etc. When it comes time to announce a tour, they have to have this Australian artist lined up. So it's not enough to be like, yeah, we'll do it. They get there and then like, okay, just pick them. You know, it's got to be a bit more coordination, a bit more planning, a bit more intention.
This is to get their subsidy or money off the venue hire.
Yes.
Which was part of the original Michael's rule that we mentioned, where one of the pillars was that the Aussie Support Act should be named on the bill at the same time as the tour is announced. That was one of them. The other one was to have equal lighting and equipment and that sort of opportunity for your Support Act to your main act.
Yes.
It's good that they are enacting that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it makes sense, because you can't just you want the build up and the hype for the main act to also benefit in some way the support act that you are inviting, who is from the country as well, so people can actually have a chance to check them out. Like I know if I'm going to a gig and I know who the support is and I've got the advanced warning of it, then I'll try and listen to that artist before I go. It just gives people a bit more time to familiarize and then have a reason to rock up early.
Yeah, well, I think I told the story here. I saw the Wombats at the Hordern Pavilion and they were supported by Jaguar Jones and the Vans, two brilliant Aussie acts. And I said, yes, I'm going there when doors open because I want to see both of the support acts as well as the Wombats. And there's no reason if you're seeing Oasis when they're out that you shouldn't go early and check out Ballpark Music as well. Because Ballpark Music in their own right are a big pull in this country. So you have them coming along to a gig, to an Oasis gig, which is already massive as well. Obviously, you know, I don't imagine Oasis will need the 20 grand off. We'll be getting the 20 grand off the venue hire because Ballpark weren't announced at the same time as their tour. But if they were, they'd be eligible. And that's the whole idea behind this scheme, is so you can go along and see Aussie artists supporting some of the bigger international acts. I've mentioned it as well. I saw the Preachers, who were making a little bit of a comeback quietly.
That's a whole other story in
that
itself
is,
too, because there was Scandal and then it was no more and now they're coming back. Anyway,
2018 or 2017, I can't remember what year it was, they supported the Foo Fighters in Sydney. And I saw them. Obviously, we knew them from doing Homebrewed, but I went along and saw them. And I think a lot of people saw them at that gig and went, oh, the Preachers, they're all right. Maybe I should check out more of their stuff.
Yeah. But the point remains, I mean, you do make a sound point, I think, about this idea that, is a 20 grand reduction going to really sway an international mega act like the Foo Fighters who you mentioned there, who are making off that one show millions of dollars, probably more than likely, is 20 grand off going to work. And that for that reason alone, you can almost put a line through ACOR in terms of it actually being used for this, I think, because the only artists that are playing at an 80,000 capacity stadium are the artists that are making millions of dollars off that one show, or hundreds of thousands of dollars off that one show. So how does 20 grand stack up in the scheme of a tour of that scale? I don't know. But as you step down those venues and you get into Allianz, Combank, et cetera, and I actually think the Opera House as well, because while it's a prestigious venue, it's not a high capacity venue, then you actually would probably start to see this incentive being drawn on a lot by touring acts.
Yeah, so this is the other argument, that have they gone far enough by, obviously they can't just say the venue hire is free, because the venues need to make money, the government need to make money off that too. But Michael's rule initially was that for it to be enacted into law that you must have an Aussie support. Was that an option that you think they could have taken as opposed to giving you money off?
Yeah, 100%. The only thing I hope with this is that maybe it's a testing the water. to see how acts respond, or touring or promoters or whoever respond to it. But I think it does just need to be law because. Yeah, maybe this is a familiarization period for, this is what you can do in Australia, and then this is what you have to do in Australia or in New South Wales at least. But it feels like one of those things that, is it going to really turn off touring acts so much that they have to pick a local support? I doubt it. And if it does, then we don't even want them, is my view. I don't want them in this country if that's their attitude. So just make it law. But maybe, they're looking at this going, we need to ease people into this, and eventually it will become law because we do have a state government that is very sympathetic to music and the arts and wanting to support it. So if it's going to come from anywhere as law, it wouldn't surprise me if it comes from these guys.
Yeah, I suppose the only other potential there is this is only in New South Wales. Yeah. So if you're a bigger international act, you're lucky if you do Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth. Anyway, it's mainly Sydney and Melbourne. Sometimes Brisbane. It's just an East Coast tour occasionally. But Sydney is always on the bill. You're never going to miss Sydney. Does that give them confidence for them to push something like this? Or as opposed to the risk of maybe we'll just do Brisbane and Melbourne because I don't want to have an Aussie support act for my whole show, my whole Australian tour. But it's also not worthwhile doing someone different just for Sydney or something like that. I don't know, just trying to play a little bit of devil's advocate that, they might have their idea. Like I remember, actually, I'm trying to think, I saw Macklemore and his support acts were effectively two people who he had also collaborated on songs of his with. So they came out and joined him on stage for his songs, but they also had their own little sort of half an hour preset. For someone like him, it might not necessarily be worth it to have those guys come over to join him on stage for his set if he has to have an Aussie take up one of those support slots as well. Like I said, just trying to play devil's advocate. It's not necessarily my belief. I'm very supportive of what the government are trying to do, but just trying to see it from the other side.
I think that's definitely you're definitely going to run into those kind of issues, but such is the consequence of wanting to support your local scene. And I feel like, an artist who really loves music and understands where it comes from and, how important things like this are would be thrilled to be like, that's cool that this country is doing that, or this state in this country at least is doing that.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things as well. Once you did it for a bit, everyone will be like, all right, this is the sitch.
Becomes part of the culture. It becomes known that, okay, I'm touring Australia, I need to find an Aussie support.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think you're probably going to have teething pains with something like this if they did make it law. But that's all hypothetical anyway because it's not law. It's just an incentive at the moment. But it's a step in the right direction. And to repeat, it's $20,000 off for each eligible show across the venues New South Wales network, and a $5,000 reduction per eligible show at the Sydney Opera House. Where is the dates? The incentive will be available for an initial 2-year period commencing this month, May 2025. So, yeah, hopefully this is them testing the waters and slowly easing us into something a bit more concrete. But it is nice to see that. And I think, particularly $20,000 for those mid-tier, it's not an insignificant amount of money to be saving.
Yeah, absolutely. For someone like Macklemore, that he's an independent artist as well. So he might not have the label connections that maybe some of the bigger artists, they're signed to Universal, Sony, Warner, whoever. They would have an Australian artist probably assigned to the same label that they could recommend for their tour, or whether it's, wouldn't be same management. I'm thinking Aussies to announce. But see, this is where that would be cut if we were editing this episode, but we're not. But, to that point, he's an independent artist. Every cent is probably worth saving if you can. So maybe that counters my previous counter argument about having people come over to support him. But anyway, are we done with that one? We want to move on, or you got something else to add?
I think we've covered everything there with Michael's Rule. If you are really curious about the nuts and bolts of Michael's Rule, you can go back to our podcast from around a year ago. The first music news we did as a
Episode
podcast.
2 as a podcast.
Yeah.
It was.
Check that out. We go through it in a bit more detail. It has come up in subsequent newses and interviews as we have gone through, but that's the bones, and we will be watching how this plays out. It'd be really good, and we do have, these kind of bodies within government. We know that now. That hopefully kind of measuring this. I'd love for them to say, this is how many artists have used this. This is who got support because of that. And for us at the end of the 2-year period or 12 months in to be able to actually have a look and see, okay, who's this benefiting and how's it working?
Yeah, I suppose that, we can self-monitor that because we know if their gig is at a Venues New South Wales gig and when the tour is announced, if they have an Aussie on the bill, we know that they're taking it up. But it would be nice, as you say, to have a report in 12 months' time to say X amount of artists have done this, therefore X amount of Aussie artists have been exposed to bigger stages and venues and more fans and et cetera, et cetera. And then I guess the actual impact that would have will be seen in 4 or 5 years if we can look that far into the future and say that person's now headlining Splendor, fingers crossed. This person's now headlining
Splendor? Question mark. Are you there?
Question
Blues
mark.
Fest.
This person is now headlining a music festival in Australia. If we go back 4 years' time, they opened for this international act when at the time they weren't, necessarily super well known. Maybe they had somewhat regular rotation on Triple J or something. But it'd be nice to be able to follow that through in reports and then tangible figures at some point, at least in the next 12 months. But looking beyond that as well, that's the effect that something like this could have. You could have an Eamonn and the Sniffers might have supported Open for Blink-182 4 or 5 years ago when now they're overseas doing their thing, which they're doing that anyway. But that's just a hypothetical example.
100%. And if you use dynamic ticket pricing for this, it just cancels out all the good. So don't do that.
Oh, it should. It really that should be in there as well because Michael would not want that.
No,
for sure.
He would not. He would not. But we will move on.
So that was praising government. Good work, Chris Minns and the state government. You've listened to the industry and stakeholders and you've followed advice and you've actually enacted some policy that will help the industry and some artists. Now I'm just going to flip that coin and see the other side of the Minns government because it does relate to music and festivals.
This is kind of a double too, really, because they are doing something good.
That's true.
But
so we'll continue with the good. Is that there will be a second festival in New South Wales to have a pill testing trial at it. Actually happened over the weekend. So it was, I'm just trying to quickly read the notes. Midnight Mafia happened last weekend. Just a second festival in the state behind Yours and Ours in Wollongong, which was the first one, which happened in March. So that's a positive. But then there is a real big negative, as far as I'm concerned, attached to this news, and that is that they have gone against every recommendation that has been given to them, and there was a strong sniffer dog presence at this festival.
And why? Why do they do that? Because the Premier just reckons. Which is in the story over and over and over again.
Well, that's the argument, right? He reckons because
they just think
the evidence and all the studies and the research show, and in fact was strongly recommending pretty sure it was the first major recommendation into this drug summit was to remove sniffer dogs and limit police presence at music festivals relating to drug activity because it's more harmful. We've mentioned it before, but if you haven't heard, the argument is that if I'm walking into a festival ground, I see there is a line of police with sniffer dogs. If I have something in my pocket that I don't want them to detect, I just digest it. And that might be hours worth that I was planning on taking throughout the day, all happening in one hit, and that's how you get your drug overdoses at festivals.
Yep, pretty much. It's panic response to seeing sniffer dogs.
Which is natural. You walk through the airport, you go, shit, do I have like a gun or cocaine in my bag? Even though you know full well you do not. But there is just always a thought of panic that I'm going through airport security, something could go wrong. And a similar thing, even you got it, you go, nah. The panic is natural, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and there's been this isn't just this happens. There's a number of coronial inquests following the deaths of people at music festivals have found that exactly this I don't want to say it was the reason that they died, because it's more complex than that, and there's a few factors at play always. But that was a very big contributing factor, was that they saw a sniffer dog. They go, oh shit, I don't want to get done. They take everything they've got at once, because they also don't want to chuck it away, and then they die because they've had such a strong dose, and it's hot, and it's all these other factors as I mentioned. But not only
the potential poisonings as well, which is it was a different substance what you thought it was, which is why pill testing is now being trialled to eliminate that. In the Yours and Ours festival, I think there was 10% I can't remember. It was 10 or 10% from memory of the tested substances were not what the person believed that they were.
Yes.
After they got it tested.
Thankfully, nothing. I think there was nothing lethal in the Yours and Ours, but there was things that people didn't think it was, which can be a bad enough time. Like 2 drugs that people sniff. One's cocaine, one's ketamine. If you thought one was the other, that could really lead to a really bad time for you. So it's not as if it has to kill you to do it. It can also throw you into a really bad mental state if you think you have something that you do not, or vice versa. But the other side to the sniffer dog thing, well, not the other side, on the same side to the sniffer dog debate is also that they're wrong most of the time.
Oh, the accuracy is
the other
terrible.
part of it. So 75% of people who are searched are not found to be in possession of illicit drugs. This indicates, and this is from, where is my source? This is a law firm, I believe, but there's also some studies into this. But yeah, basically the accuracy of sniffer dogs is around 25%, which, they could be more accurate than that, but it's more to do with the fact that they pick up anything. And you could have brushed past the trace of this, or you could have had something on you a couple of days before, or last time you wore
They're
those
too good at their job.
They're too good. So they're not correct very often, pretty much at all. So this is the other side of it. It's a huge resource waste in that sense. They're not very accurate. They lead to negative outcomes. But above all else, we've been here. We've done this. We've done so many coronial inquests, as I mentioned before, studies into it, Senate inquiries. They've done months, years now, probably worth of inquiries into what works and what doesn't. And every single one of them comes back and says, don't do the sniffer dogs. Do the pill testing. It took us years to get past premiers just hearing all of that evidence carefully collected and arranged and going, yeah, but I just don't reckon. And so we got past that. We've got pill testing trials happening. Great. And then the sniffer dog thing, it's just a bridge too far for Chris Minns, whose comments basically just say, I don't reckon. And it's
Effectively,
so frustrating.
Let's read the quote. He said, I'm not prepared to say in relation to this big music festival, look, it's a big green light. If you're going to ingest drugs, the police aren't going to be there. I think that would send the wrong message, and I think it would have the unintended consequences of seeing more people take and ingest the drugs, not less.
I think no one's saying that either. No one's saying it's a big green light you're going to ingest drugs. That is not what is said when you reduce police presence. It's moving to a harm reduction strategy instead of a punitive policing strategy to drug control.
Well, what message does it send? If you went to the festival over the weekend, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too. But what sort of message does it? We've got pill testing. You're like, okay, good. So if I was going to take something, I can get it tested and it can be safe. Oh, there's also going to be heavy police and sniffer dog presence. And the New South Wales Police said the sniffer dog's use at Sydney Olympic Park over the weekend would focus on detecting supply. What message does that send a festival goer? Okay, I can take my thing, I can get it. I mean, they did say that they weren't going to be hounding around the tent. How accurate that ended up being, I'm not 100% sure. But can you just... what message does it send? I can go, I can get it tested, I can make sure it's safe before I do take it. Oh, by the way, there's a sniffer dog there. Oh, I should just digest it before I get it tested. Is that what message does it send?
Pretty much. They're often in the line as you're entering a festival is often when they're kind of running the dogs because everyone's in the same area effectively and they have to walk the same way to get in. So if you're in line and you're like, I'm going to test this when I get in there, but here's a dog, then the efficacy of the testing is out the window because you've already panicked and consumed it, which is no good. The comment about they're going to be focusing on supply, like you don't get the dog and you're like, oh, okay, here, Fido, make sure you only go for the dealers, all right? We don't care about the personal. That's not how it works. People are just going to get charged or caught or whatever else. And, like whatever you think about people being caught with drugs, I understand. It is illegal. We accept that completely. But you can't have this mixed messaging in one part harm reduction. We're trying this great harm reduction strategy, and at the same time, the very thing that anyone who advocates for harm reduction and says don't do, you're doing it.
Yeah, I'm just on that point about the supply. Do people bring stuff in to sell at festivals, or do most people arrive at the festival already with what they're going to take?
I think some people do take it in there.
To sell to people. Yeah. Okay, because I've never taken anything, so I probably sound very naive here, but I've just never been aware of anyone purchasing whilst at the festival. I've always just had the assumption that they have their supply before they enter the campgrounds.
Yeah, I think
or the festival.
So if it's multi-day, you're more likely to get people who are trying to supply. One day, I don't know, like I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it. I've heard some funny. It's a funny story that I've heard about how someone got caught once doing this, where they just had their entire stash on their passenger side seat, and they got pulled over on the way to the festival, and the cop just saw it, and I was like, "Well, you kind of deserve that." Like, anyway,
at least when the vape stores get busted into, they've got their whole supply in a van at a completely different location or something. So when the cops come and bust their supply for their vapes and illegal cigarettes, that they can then just open business again the next day as per usual because they had all their supply in a different location.
Yeah.
Allegedly. This is, again, what I've heard. I don't own or participate in vape
He's
stores.
vaping right now. We'll get the video up. But no, it's less common, I would say, for one-day ones because I just feel like the risk is, as we're discussing, if you're trying to bring in a huge amount, the risk is very, very high. But that aside, there would be people there who are probably trying to supply, and that's what police say they were targeting. How that ran out, we're not 100% sure, but it is definitely mixed messaging in terms of harm reduction. So big tick that we're doing the pill testing trial. That's lovely. That's really good. But you got to listen to all of the advice that you spent millions of dollars collecting.
Absolutely. And I mean, on a lot of the Drug Summit reports and findings, Greens MP Kate Feynman called the report politically palatable and said there was no excuse not to act on the recommendations.
Which is bang on. This is why we do it, and it's just very it's the same thing with climate. It's the same thing with a bunch of other things where we get all these people who really know what they're talking about and dedicate their lives to this, come and give us answers, and then the heads of governments and states, whatever, just go, yeah, but I just don't think that. And then we get nowhere.
Yeah, I still sometimes go back to whether it's a liability issue for the state government. If the government are saying, but mind you, they're doing the trials. So no, that negates that liability debate, which I had prior to them actually approving of the trials, was if, you go to a pill testing tent, it said, yep, you're all good. And then tragically you pass away, and then they find out in an autopsy later on, or however they find out, that actually the drug had some sort of chemical in it which was not safe to consume, but the pill testing site said it did. I'm going to sue the state government for the death of my child or friend or partner or whoever. Then I know that was maybe one of the reasons why I thought they were so hesitant to adopt it. But we've had 2 trials now in the state, both to fairly successful results. I don't know. It's frustrating.
Yeah. We are edging in the right direction, but you just worry about, who is lost as we really, really take our time to get to the place we're inevitably going to end up. I don't think we're going to go back to this hard line. We're not going to go to like the Philippines, Robert Duterte, where we're just getting the police to murder drug users. I think we're slowly edging towards a harm reduction approach. but whether we get there sooner or later, I don't know. And what that means in terms of cost along the way, we don't know, unfortunately. But it feels like we've had, this being advised for so many years, and people have died in that time, and maybe they wouldn't have, because people are going to do it anyway. Is what, regardless of what you reckon about it, people are going to do it anyway. So we may as well try and make it safe for those people.
Yeah, so don't send sniffer dogs when you got pill testing. It's just so counterintuitive.
Yeah. So that's that story. Another, we're kind of warm yellow. We're warmish yellow for the state government. No, maybe a little bit green, amber, green-ish.
Yeah, we're between a yellow and a lime.
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
There's a little bit of green tinge in there. They failed big time on the sniffer dog part, but they passed some pretty good policy relating to Michael's rule, and they are more or less, I think, quite supportive of music and the arts and pushing in that direction. On that note, quickly, I guess the federal election as well was last weekend. Obviously a landslide victory to Labor. We outlined their policies and what they're planning to do. And the good news is that it's sort of much the same of what they've already been contributing. And I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but you have to remember that they came from pretty much nothing and they built quite a bit.
Yeah. This is like when the championship team kind of doesn't offer much in preseason. You go, yeah, but they won it all last year, so they're probably going to come good because they've got the good coach and players.
They've already got a good foundation for them to then build off, and then they don't need to reinvent the wheel because they're already doing quite well as it was last year. So this previous term, they did quite well. They stormed to the top.
Yep.
Surprised everyone by enacting some pretty good stuff. And then this term, or this season, if we're continuing the sporting analogy, we expect them to remain at the top and remain very competitive, but it's not going to be as big of a jump as it was because they finished last the season before.
Yes.
Like the Mariners.
Right. And hopefully they don't do what the Mariners did, because the Mariners were shit house this year.
We don't want to see shit policy, please.
No,
we don't want to see going back on a lot of what was already discussed and promised.
No. But there's a lot of benefit of doubt kind of stuff going on here, because what we concluded, if you do want to kind of go back, it's less relevant now the election's over. If you want to go back and listen to kind of what the majors parties were offering, then you can do that on our previous music news podcast, the last podcast on your feed from us. But basically Labor did a great deal in the first term compared to any other government before them in recent memory for music and arts in Australia. However, they weren't taking much arts policy. There was very little mention of arts policy through the election campaign or anything of that nature. So all we kind of had from them was, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. The Revive plan is up for its 5-year renewal in their term, so that's going to be something they're going to have to act on and seek feedback and develop policy on. So we know that's going to happen, and we say, well, you did a lot previously. We know this is coming up. We kind of expect it to continue based on their form already.
Yeah, absolutely, which is, I think, positive news for the arts. There's quite a few, because Greens, if you missed it, they had the best music and arts policy. Obviously, Adam Bant lost his seat. He's no longer the leader of the Greens. They're searching for a leader like the Liberal Party are. But as of recording, I don't think the Greens have a single seat in the lower house. They're expected, I think, still to get one in Queensland, but they have, I think, about 11 in the Senate. So that's where a lot of, them pushing can come from, which is in the Senate. So to try and help some of that policy be pushed through. Whether that's going to be their top priority, we mentioned in the last one, Senator Sarah Hanson-Young.
Yes.
She was big on music and arts, and I don't actually know if she did retain her spot in the Senate. I imagine she was one of them that did. So potentially positive news that we do have someone there to try and keep pushing the government along. If the government are, too focused on other things, they might want to sit on their hands with music and arts. Someone from the other side could be pushing that along.
Yes, absolutely. So they do have which is, as you said, I did just check. according to the ABC, the Greens do not have a seat in the lower house yet. I think they are, as you said, expected to pick up at least one. It's less than they had. So we were kind of like, minority government could be an option with Greens holding the balance of power in the lower house. That did not happen.
No.
Not even near. It's quite
close.
an outstanding result. Not in necessarily we're not giving praise. Just like, wow, that's remarkable what happened in that election.
Yeah.
Personally, I would have preferred the minority option. But we've got what we've got, and the Greens are going to have some kind of sway in the Senate where they are going to be pushing, hopefully for some arts policy as well, because the legislation and laws have to travel through both houses of parliament in order to be approved. So we do have that. We will obviously be watching, keeping an eye on how this parliament unfolds. But we do have in government a government who has done a lot so far and will probably continue to do so.
Yeah, well, 2 points on that. One, as I mentioned, Adam Bant losing his seat. He was the leader of the Greens, so maybe a new leader might push the Greens in a different direction.
That's true.
So we don't know what that might mean for music and the arts. And then the other thing to consider is Anthony Albanese. He's a muso, not personally, but he's a big fan of music and concerts and going to gigs, etc. So that's all positive as well. But I've just seen that Eamonn is El Gato on our recording.
Yes.
So I think that means it is time for us to wrap up this music news. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for watching. If we do get video out on this one, I'm not too sure we will, but thank you for your time. We will see you on Monday with an interview, and the following Monday with another interview. They are both confirmed. One of them a local, one of them a big national act who is touring the Central Coast this month. And then back with another music news, and I'm boring with our schedule.
I don't know why we don't tell you who the artists are, but we're not going to for consistency.
Subscribe to our Patreon.
Yeah, actually.
And that's where you will find out.
That's right. But yes, thank you for listening. Hope we've informed you. Hope it sounds like the other ones normally do.
Yeah, hopefully. All right, bye.
Bye. Well, supermarkets sell produce, but you know who produced this one? It was Cameron Smith. My good friend. He did it all. And it was recorded on Darkinjung Land at Sonora Studios in Tuggerah. And for more from us, more produce, www.homebrewed.au.